So glad you could join us here on a Friday. Well, we made it. We made it to the end of the month and the end of the quarter. We made it to USDA report day. Today, of course, is when we get the quarterly stocks reports from USDA and also the prospective plannings report from USDA. Both those major reports come out at 11 o'clock Central Time. That's noon Eastern Time, of course. And here to help us analyze what to expect in the market activity today, we go to the phones and let's join Rich Nelson of Allendale Incorporated in McHenry, Illinois. He joins us each and every morning here at this time. And Rich, always good to have you with us. As we look ahead to the big reports coming up here in just a few hours, what do you see happening with the grain trade ahead of that? Do you think it's just going to be totally flat or what?
Definitely have to dial in some more or less mixed trade for today's session. I think the overnight close where corn is up 1 and beans were down 1 probably will be the case here for this next hour or two. As a reminder, we do, of course, have this report in front of us, and typically we don't get too much volume past maybe the first 30 minutes or so of the day session trade here on days like this.
All right, let's walk through some of the pre-report estimates, and let's take a look first at that prospective plannings report that's going to be coming up. Everybody's anticipating that corn acreage to be roughly around 91 million acres. That's if you take an average of all the analysts combined. Now, the soybean number, they are expecting to be about 88.1 or 0.13 million acres on the average trade guess. We do have some upper ends of the range of estimates, around 90 million there. The all wheat could be about 46.06 million acres, about 4 million under what we had last year at this time. Big jump in soybean acres. Do you think there's a possibility that maybe that will shift a little bit based on the recent decline we've seen in soybean prices?
You've got to assume so. Like we talked about yesterday, since this survey was taken out roughly around March 1st, and many people have suggested that perhaps these numbers might have changed since then. So based on price movement, of course, this report may be a little old in the trade's viewpoint, and as well as, we still have a full week of, or full month in front of us of weather and all kinds of issues which could actually change those numbers. Lastly, let's also keep in mind USDA has a preventive plant estimate plugged into here, where they'd more or less put in average planting pace, or average planting success here into these numbers as well. So 3 different areas where maybe you could argue that these numbers aren't quite the complete story as far as plantings.
There is kind of an outside factor there in the fact that on the extended forecast, it seems like they tend to lean toward warmer but wet weather continuing in most of the key growing areas. If that would be the case, maybe that would bump up the soybean acreage a little bit.
And that's exactly right. We have all kinds of arguments you can certainly make for saying, hey, maybe soybean acres won't have this large increase this year. But on the other hand, like you're pointing out, there's all kinds of other arguments here on the other side of things here. So this whole planning discussion, it's great to see USDA's numbers here today, and they're valid. It's important to see a farmer perspective as of March 1. And the trade will trade USDA's numbers. Like we said, though, we'll see what happens in terms of what actually does get planted later on this year.
And as one analyst pointed out to me many years ago, they said even though they may not trust the numbers, that's all the market has to trade on until they get something better and more concrete later on. Let's run down real quickly the quarterly stocks numbers just so our folks at home can write it down if they want to compare. On the corn, they're looking for 8.55 billion bushels, the soybeans 1.68 billion, and the wheat at 1.62 billion bushels. Rich, I'll bring you back here in a moment. We'll analyze the latest developments in the livestock trade and cover that hogs and pigs report when we come back. Well, we're talking with Rich Nelson of Allendale Incorporated in McHenry, Illinois, about what to expect in the livestock trade today. And of course, in case you missed it yesterday, after the markets closed up on the daytime session, USDA did in fact come out with their quarterly hogs and pigs report. And as we take a look at the numbers, the trade was looking for an all hogs and pigs number of about 103.9%. What did we get? Well, we got 104%. So just it couldn't have been any closer, really. Kept for breeding, the average trade guess was 101.8%, and we came out with a number from USDA of 101%. So that was the biggest variance right there, about 0.8 of a point. Kept for marketings were expected to be 104% of a year ago, and when the USDA number came out, it was 104%, so no surprise there. Rich, you and I were talking before we came back on the air here, and that was one of those major reports where we had weeks of anticipation. Turned out to be a big fat dud when the numbers came out, didn't it?
That sure is right. You know, it more or less told the story that we all have been kind of looking for, that we are still in expansion. Producers are still aggressively right now, still adding on brand new gilts into the nation's hog herds, replacing some sows. There was higher sow slaughter than expected in this most recent quarter, but we did replace those numbers, which is the message we have here from USDA. So even though we have this long-term story, though, whether we have the same type of bearish price reaction, maybe that's a whole separate discussion. Like we noted yesterday, this market has been falling already down into that report. So perhaps many people who normally would be bears based on these numbers might just say, hey, numbers came in close to expected, though they are large. And heck, after this good drop we've had in pricing, maybe we can trade this market steady here or mix more or less on Friday.
As we look at that lean hog chart now, we're looking at an April contract on the screen for our viewers at home right now. But man, that has been one big precipitous drop for most of this year. Since the first part of February, that market has just been, other than one spike there, it's been much, much lower. So as you and I were talking, as we came back on the air here, I don't know if they could throw much more bearish news at this market at the present time, as far as having it already built into the trade. So where else do they go now?
That's exactly right. And what we're looking at right now is probably more or less a seasonal trade. We do have a drop in seasonal prices, which is normal and has been going on for some time. We're off the highs for both cash hogs and cash pork by $7 to $8. In terms of the seasonals, normally we have a bounce in the next 8 to 9 days, 8 to 9 trading sessions, and then we start this seasonal summer rally on the way up. So I think that's the way we've got to play this market here right now.
Now we're showing the pork carcass cutout values were down $1.04 yesterday, but wow, the beef cutout values really took a hit again yesterday afternoon, according to USDA, down $1.71 again on choice cut. Selects were down $2.21, and we had a weaker cash cattle market that developed in the plains. We were several dollars under what we had a week ago. What does that mean for the futures trade today?
I think that's the case right now. This market will have to respect these issues. Like you mentioned, we're now down 6 days in a row for choice and select beef, so that does give us pressure on that end. As far as these futures for today, the other thing we're looking at was that open interest discussion, the number of new entrants into the market. That one actually did drop, 984 contracts today, so we are seeing some long liquidation finally start. So we think that will continue now in the next few weeks.
Rich, as always, great to visit with you. Thanks for all the info. Rich Nelson of Allendale, Incorporated in McHenry, Illinois. And Janet, we're setting the table for today's market activity, which will get underway in about 6 minutes from right now.
All right, got one report checked off.
Very interesting today. Yeah.
Got another report on the horizon.
Lots to talk about today.
Thank you very much, Marlon.